Currently, the newest entry in the Fallout series, Fallout 76, is in a playable beta stage with periodically available play schedules given by Bethesda so far, and it also has been demoed by members of the gaming press separately. It's a venerated franchise and one in a stable of series that solidifies Bethesda as a developer that other gaming companies pay attention to. Fallout has been active for some time, and as RPG franchises tend to be, it contains a sprawling mythology. Some may have recently heard about lore concerns that die-hard fans took issue with over the Brotherhood of Steel, the outcry of which was so noticeable that it prompted Bethesda to respond. Do you have no idea what's going on? Well, we're going to set up a story primer for the main Fallout games. Though this video covers the main numbered titles, the Fallout series is host to a few spin-offs. With all of that established, here's the entire story of Fallout. Central to the Fallout series is the fact that all games take place after a nuclear conflict between the United States and China late in the 21st century called the Great War. In an effort to cut its dependence on fossil fuels, the United States secretly develops nuclear fusion reactors for mass energy harvest. Successful in their endeavor, America becomes immensely powerful with their newfound energy source and independence. But this development does not arrive before China and the US go to war in response to an oil shortage, brought about when China invades Alaska. The resulting war raises the United States into the post-apocalyptic landscape so closely identified with the series. The war over oil is a global conflict as well, but it's China's invasion that creates the setting of Fallout. However, before the land was scarred with the effects of nuclear destruction, the United States also developed underground shelters called vaults and scattered them across the country, or at least so it would seem. These vaults were not intended as shelters, but rather human experimentation facilities meant to test the reaction of people against all sorts of social and biochemical variables per the whims of the government. There were not nearly enough vaults made to protect the entirety of the country. That being said, with the radiated surface of America uninhabitable and much of the previously existing American society destroyed, the vaults were co-opted by the surviving populace to be used as a living space. The scarcity of many essential living resources is an important undercurrent in Fallout. Additionally, the radiation has mutated some human and other animal life with prolonged exposure to the toxicity. The franchise made its debut on Windows PCs in the late 90s with Fallout. Nearly a century after the war between China and the United States, the remnants of humanity that remains in the US, along with the newly annexed Canada, have colonized the vaults. The plot revolves around Vault 13 in Southern California, the battleground of the nuclear war between the US and China. The water processing machinery for the vault is faulty since its water chip is broken, and the overseer of the vault, a leader typically assigned to every facility, tasks the player character, known in-game as the Vault Dweller, with finding a replacement chip under a time limit, past which life cannot be sustained in Vault 13. In-game, it's possible to delay the time limit for the water chip by soliciting water supply from elsewhere. In any case, retrieving the water chip is necessary to move the game forward. Once accomplished, the Overseer notifies the player character of the great threat from the Master, a mutant who plans to use a deadly supervirus called the Forced Evolutionary Virus to create an army of mutants out of humans as part of his vision for a perfect world. Separately, a military base that houses the Forced Evolutionary Virus must be destroyed so as to not be a threat to humans. In the process of accomplishing these major tasks, the Vault Dweller travels to another vault and other human civilizations, all of which can be significantly affected by your actions. However, the plot starts with pursuing water for Vault 13 and concludes with confronting the Master and eliminating the military base. There are multiple endings that indicate fail conditions for the plot and are non-canonical. All variations of the eradication of Vault 13, whether it by failing to retrieve the water chip or through mutant invasion, or even joining the Master's army of mutants. But it is essential for the completion of Fallout that the Master is defeated and the Forced Evolutionary Virus, along with the base housing it, is deleted. These events are the canon outcome for the plot of the first game. The Vault Dweller of the first game is ultimately cast out after completing their mission for all of their heroic efforts for Vault 13. This is explained by the Overseer, stating that the citizens of the Vault would not want to live alongside the returning Vault Dweller due to his prolonged exposure to the radiation on the Earth's surface. 1 year after the release of Fallout, the next entry in the series would be released on Windows PC and years later on Macintosh computers with Fallout 2. The Vault Dweller from the first game would take a band of settlers and go on to found a new village civilization north of California named Arroyo. Many years after the first game and the Vault Dwellers, Arroyo is established and settled peacefully. Meanwhile, in the southern reaches of California, a new government called the New California Republic is unilaterally established and steadily extends their influence northward within the former state of California. The game begins in the year 2241 with Arroyo suffering its worst recorded drought. The leader of Arroyo, the village elder, asks the player character to acquire an item called the Creation Kit from Vault 13. It is a device that can be used to terraform the radiated surface of the planet. You play as the Chosen One, a descendant of the Vault Dweller from the first game. Once having found Vault 13, the Chosen One discovers that the vault is now overrun by a mutant species called Deathclaws. Deathclaws are present in all Fallout games, but the ones encountered here are a species capable of higher reasoning after having been experimented on with the forced evolutionary virus. There are several ambiguous depictions of sentient life in the Fallout series that continually ask the question of what counts as human or civilized. Anyway, after having acquired a creation kit from Vault 13, you return to Arroyo, only to find that it has been occupied by a group called the Enclave. The Enclave represents the remnants of pre-nuclear apocalypse United States government, the same entity responsible for creating vaults and experimenting on humans. In Fallout 2, they are in possession of a great technological weapons arsenal and have a base on an oil rig in the ocean. Upon reaching the Enclave base, you learn that the human inhabitants of Vault 13 and Arroyo as well were captured and are in the Enclave base for more human experiments against the forced evolutionary virus. The Enclave has now modified the forced evolutionary virus into an airborne disease. Its ability to spread is far more potent and will target any living being with mutated DNA, thereby giving them the ability to create a world of only genetically pure human beings free from mutation, as the Enclave represents humans with unmutated DNA. The ending of the game involves the Chosen One rescuing the captured Vault 13 and Arroyo inhabitants from the oil rig, and ultimately eliminating a mutated Secret Service agent named Frank Horrigan, the game's final boss. The conclusion of the plot sees all of the innocent Vault 13 and Arroyo people rescued from the Enclave and returned home, and with a creation kit taken to Arroyo so that the civilization can be restored. It's a happy ending. Fallout 3 would not arrive until a decade after Fallout 2 in our time, and it would also mark the introduction of the series to consoles, being developed for the PlayStation 3 and 360 alongside Windows PC. The player character is a resident of Vault 101, which has been sealed off from the rest of the outside world for 200 years and located around the Washington, D.C. area. One day, James, your father, mysteriously disappears. As a doctor and scientist who's important to the operation of the vault, his disappearance sends the vault into chaos. You eventually break out of the vault in search of your dad, also prompted by the sudden efforts of this vault's overseer to capture you once notice of James's disappearance spreads. Outside of the vault, you can travel to towns collectively referred to as the Capital Wasteland, containing settlements around Washington, D.C. Separate from these settlements that you can travel to is a location called the Citadel, the headquarters to the Eastern American contingent of the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel operates akin to a religious order but without any concept of spirituality. Rather, their goal is the preservation of humanity and the elimination of mutants. Similarly important is the concentrating of the power of technology so as to be uncontestable from rival factions or other independent belligerents. The reverence of technology is seen as valuable in itself. They are also a powerful military force, and its founding members are from the US military. While traveling through the Capital Wasteland, you search for James, speaking to a DJ of a radio station, and are christened as the Lone Wanderer, matching the non-specific naming style assigned to other Fallout protagonists. Then, in a nearby city, the Lone Wanderer meets with a scientist who used to work with James, learning that your family originally lived outside of Vault 101, though you were taken there when your mother, Catherine, died during childbirth. Directed to Vault 112, the Lone Wanderer finally encounters James, alive, though suspended in a virtual reality simulation. After breaking him out of his simulation, the Lone Wanderer learns about Project Purity, a research project designed to purify water from the Potomac River and making the surrounding region more habitable. By the time of Fallout 3's beginning, Project Purity is left unfinished, with James abandoning the project to care for his and Catherine's child. Additionally, Project Purity was not yielding tangible results, thus demotivating the interests of the Brotherhood of Steel, who served as a protective force for the researchers against forced evolutionary virus-exposed humans called supermutants. You also learn in these conversations that a creation kit can be used to complete Project Purity. Eventually leaving Vault 112 and reconnecting with some of the researching team from Project Purity, James, the Lone Wanderer, and a band of the project's original researchers travel to the Jefferson Memorial, which served as Project Purity's headquarters. While there, the Enclave, returning as a primary antagonistic force in Fallout 3, with remnants of the Enclave from the events of Fallout 2 traveling eastward prior to the beginning of Fallout 3. Cornered in the control room of Project Purity's headquarters, James floods the place with radiation and forces the retreat of the Enclave. In the Lone Wanderer's escape, James entreats you to acquire a creation kit and realize the vision of Project Purity. The Lone Wanderer then travels to the destroyed Pentagon, now styled in-game as the aforementioned Citadel, the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Steel in the Columbian Commonwealth. The Lone Wanderer is then directed to Vault 87, a testing site for the forced evolutionary virus, the origin point for the Capital Wasteland supermutants, and home to a creation kit. Once acquiring the creation kit, you are promptly captured by the Enclave, including Augustus Autumn, the military lead of the Enclave who survived the radiation flood at Vault 112. Taken to an Enclave base, their leader, President John Henry, later shown to be a supercomputer rather than a human, reveals that his plan is to take control of Project Purity and contaminate the Potomac River with the forced evolutionary virus, effectively ensuring the demise of life outside of the Enclave. With the surviving Augustus Autumn commanding the Enclave's forces to hunt the Lone Wanderer, you eventually escape, with the Vault 87 creation kit and a new strain of the forced evolutionary virus acquired while at the Enclave base in tow. The game concludes with the Lone Wanderer working with the Brotherhood of Steel to storm the Project Purity base controlled by the Enclave. The Lone Wanderer's final choice is in deciding whether or not to activate Project Purity, who will activate it with the creation kit if so, effectively killing themselves if the control room is radiated, and whether or not the forced evolutionary virus will be introduced into Project Purity. It's not agreed upon what the exact canon ending is, other than the successful activation of Project Purity. Fallout 4 takes place further east in the United States, in Massachusetts. You and your family, consisting of a spouse of the opposite gender, your son Sean, and a housekeeping robot named Codsworth, are selected by Vault-Tec, the corporation that originally developed the vaults, to enter Vault 111. We know of vaults as being intended as experimentation facilities for humans and later co-opted as contained civilizations. Before relocating, the protagonist family learns of an impending nuclear attack. This is the same nuclear attack from the war between China and the US and transforms the world of Fallout. Safely transported to Vault 111, your family is rushed into cryostasis, a state of frozen sleep. During your family's frozen sleep, Vault 111 security personnel rebel against its scientists. This led to a massacre, the survivors of which were those in cryostasis and those who abandoned Vault 111, with some of the people in cryostasis perishing without the Vault scientists to watch them. After an unknown period of time, two strangers attack Vault 111 and in the process awake the family that was previously sleeping. These assailants kill your spouse and kidnap Sean and then place the player back into cryostasis. You eventually reawake when the life support system for your cryostasis tube malfunctions. With Codsworth nowhere to be seen, you are now stylized as the sole survivor. The sole survivor ventures to their previous home, Sanctuary Hills, only to find it destroyed. Codsworth is found there. At this point, the sole survivor's primary game mission is directed by a quest to find their long-lost son, Sean. Along the way, the player encounters three factions, with the ending of the game being influenced by who the player decides to ally with. In any case, the sole survivor leaves Sanctuary Hills for Concord, north of Massachusetts, encountering a group called the Minutemen. At the Museum of Freedom, the sole survivor defends them from the attack against raiders and a death claw. With the Minutemen eventually relocating to Sanctuary Hills, the sole survivor is directed to Diamond City. There you encounter a reporter named Piper Wright, who tells you about a detective named Nick Valentine, who's a synth, or synthetic organic, an android functioning on the level of humans as we know them, and developed and mass-produced by an organization called the Institute. Valentine, with his dog assistant named Dogmeat, assists the sole survivor in tracking Conrad Kellogg, also a synth, who killed your spouse. Confronting Kellogg at Fort Hagen, you learn that Sean is actually an Institute researcher. After killing Kellogg, the sole survivor retrieves a cybernetic implant in his brain that contains his memories. Meanwhile, a massive airship called the Pridwin flies overhead, heralding the arrival of the Brotherhood of Steel. The sole survivor then travels to Boston and, consulting with a woman named Dr. Amari, learn that people and synths travel between the Institute and the surface of the world via teleportation. To learn more about entering the Institute's headquarters, you are tasked with investigating the Glowing Sea, an explosion impact site from the time of the mass nuclear destruction of the continent's surface. There you meet Brian Virgil, a former Institute scientist who is now a super mutant due to prolonged forced evolutionary virus exposure. Virgil explains that the Institute can now be accessed by obtaining a chip used by elite Institute soldiers called coursers, more powerful and capable than the strongest of humans. After obtaining that chip, the sole survivor must then visit the Railroad, an in-game faction motivated by the desire to free synths from Institute control. One of their researchers, Tinker Tom, must analyze the chip for data that can be used by Virgil to produce a blueprint for the teleportation device. At this point, the sole survivor chooses between one of three factions for assistance in developing the teleportation device: the Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad, or the Minutemen. Then, the sole survivor infiltrates the Institute and eventually encounters Sean, now the director of the Institute and significantly aged. He retains the appearance of a 60-year-old man but is biologically 210 years old. He was kidnapped 60 years before the sole survivor escaped from Vault 111 to be used as a synth experiment by the Institute, though later becoming its director. The sole survivor makes a choice to ally with one of the Minutemen, the Railroad, the Brotherhood of Steel, or the Institute. The first three fight against the Institute, while the Institute, if chosen, will work to destroy the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel. Regardless of this last campaign, Sean will die either by cancer or by being killed by the sole survivor. The common thread in all paths is an ending in which the player is asked to raise a young synth Sean as their own. The upcoming Fallout 76 is interesting in that it is a multiplayer game only. It exists in a separate continuity from the 4 Fallout games, though still following the war between China and the United States that sees the raising of the surface of the continent of North America. Taking place in 2102 and in Appalachia, it centers around Vault 76, one of 17 vaults designed not to be used for human experimentation. You, as a resident of the vault, venture to the surface upon command from this vault's overseer. She, however, has left the vault, with story missions given to the player via recordings she has left behind, directing players around the world of Fallout 76, said to be 4 times larger than Fallout 4's map. That the game is multiplayer only is meant to evoke the sense that survival and adventuring is a shared experience with other players. There are no human non-playable characters in this game. There is a main quest that dictates Fallout 76, centered around questions about how the world appears in this Fallout timeline. With this unique execution of a vision for storytelling, it should be interesting to see what types of story experience awaits. And that concludes our story primer for the main Fallout games. While the Fallout games feature significantly many more characters and the lore of the franchise is more robust than what is covered in this video, it should serve as a basic understanding of the events of the main Fallout games thus far, and should help viewers new to the franchise understand what alternate history and plot progression that Fallout 76 is meant to be contrasting with regards to its story campaign. So, thanks for watching. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.